Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Aurora's edge, watching the stars through the main screen. His ship was not the biggest or fastest in the human fleet, but it was his home. For 3 years, he and his crew had been exploring the far corners of space, looking for new worlds and ancient secrets. "Captain, we're getting something strange on the sensors," said Tony Blake from his engineering station. Tony was young, maybe 25, with quick hands and an even quicker mind. He had joined the crew fresh from the academy, eager to see what lay beyond Earth's solar system. Jake walked over to Tony's station and looked at the readings. "What kind of strange?" "There's a massive energy signature about 2 million kilometers ahead. It's not moving, just sitting there in space. The computer says it's artificial, but it doesn't match anything in our database." Dr. Lisa Grant looked up from her research desk. She was the ship's expert on alien cultures and ancient history. Her dark hair was always tied back in a neat ponytail, and her green eyes missed nothing. "Artificial could mean a lot of things out here. Could be a space station, a probe, or even a derelict ship." Jake nodded. "Take us closer, but keep our distance. I want to know what we're dealing with before we get too close." The Aurora's edge moved forward through the darkness. As they got closer, their sensors began to paint a clearer picture of what waited for them. What they found made everyone on the bridge stop and stare. It was a ship, but unlike anything they had ever seen. The vessel was enormous, easily 3 times bigger than Earth's largest warships. Its hull was black as midnight with strange curves that seemed to flow like water frozen in time. Along its surface, faint lines of blue light pulsed slowly, like a sleeping heartbeat. "My God," whispered Lisa. "Look at the size of that thing." Tony's fingers flew over his controls, gathering as much information as he could. "Captain, this ship is old. Really old. The computer estimates it's been out here for at least 50,000 years. 50,000? Jake felt a chill run down his spine. That's longer than human civilization has existed. "The hull material doesn't match anything we know about," Tony continued. "It should have been destroyed by space dust and radiation after all this time, but it looks perfect, like it was built yesterday." Lisa moved to her own station and began running scans. "The design is completely alien, but there's something familiar about it too. The proportions. The way the sections flow together. It's like whoever built this understood beauty as well as function." Jake studied the massive ship on the screen. Something about it made him uneasy. Despite its beauty, there was something predatory about its design, like a sleeping shark waiting in the depths. "Any signs of life?" he asked. "None," Tony replied. "No power readings, no movement, no communications. But Captain, there's something else. The ship is giving off a very faint energy field. It's so weak our sensors can barely detect it, but it's there." "Could be residual power from old systems," Lisa suggested. "Even after 50,000 years, some alien technologies might still have energy stored in them." Jake made his decision. "We're going aboard." "Sir?" Tony looked surprised. "Shouldn't we contact command first? Get a military escort? By the time we send a message back to Earth and wait for orders, we could be here for months," Jake said. "This could be the discovery of the century. We're trained explorers. This is what we do." Lisa was already preparing her equipment. "I'll need full scans of everything we find. If this ship belongs to an unknown alien race, it could rewrite everything we know about galactic history." An hour later, Jake, Lisa, and Tony floated through space in their protective suits, approaching the alien ship. Up close, it was even more impressive. The hull stretched away in all directions, covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change when they weren't looking directly at them. "There," Lisa pointed to what looked like an opening in the ship's side. "That could be an airlock." Tony scanned the area with his handheld device. "I'm reading atmosphere on the other side. The air is old, but it's breathable for humans." They entered the ship through the airlock, which responded to their presence by opening smoothly. Inside, emergency lights flickered on, revealing a corridor that stretched into darkness. The walls were smooth and curved, made of the same black material as the hull. "The lights still work after 50,000 years, Tony said in amazement. "What kind of technology is this?" They moved deeper into the ship, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The corridors were wide enough for several people to walk side by side, and the ceiling was high above their heads. Everything about the ship suggested its builders were larger than humans. "Look at these symbols," Lisa said, running her gloved hand along the wall. "They're not just decorative. I think they're some kind of writing system." They passed through several chambers, each one revealing more mysteries. Some rooms contained equipment they couldn't identify. Others held what looked like sleeping quarters, but designed for beings much taller than humans. Finally, they reached the heart of the ship. The corridor opened into a vast chamber with a domed ceiling that stretched high above them. In the center of the room stood a single console made of blue crystal that pulsed with faint light. "This has to be the command center," Jake said, his voice echoing in the large space. Lisa approached the console carefully. "The crystal structure is unlike anything I've seen. It's not just a computer interface, it's almost like it's alive." Tony pulled out his scanner and ran it over the console. "Captain, this thing is definitely active. Low power, but there's definitely something running inside it." "Can you interface with it?" Jake asked. "Maybe. The connections look compatible with our systems, but I'd need to touch the console directly to establish a link." Lisa grabbed Tony's arm. "Wait. We don't know what this thing does. It could be dangerous." Tony looked at the console, then at his captain. "Sir, this could be our only chance to learn about this ship and its builders. If we can access their computer systems, imagine what we might discover." Jake stared at the crystal console. Every instinct told him to be careful, to call for backup, to follow proper procedures. But another part of him, the part that had driven him to become an explorer, wanted to know the secrets this ancient ship held. "Do it," he said finally, "but be ready to disconnect at the first sign of trouble." Tony nodded and slowly reached out toward the crystal surface. The moment his bare hand touched the console, everything changed. The moment Tony's hand touched the crystal console, the entire ship erupted into life. Lights blazed throughout the command chamber, and a deep humming sound filled the air. The console beneath Tony's palm grew warm, and suddenly he couldn't move his hand away. "Tony!" Lisa shouted, but her voice seemed to come from very far away. Tony felt something rushing into his mind. It was like having a river of information poured directly into his brain. Images, sounds, and thoughts that weren't his own flooded through him. For a terrifying moment, he thought he might lose himself completely in the alien consciousness that was now touching his mind. The ship was alive, not just a machine, but a thinking, feeling entity that had been sleeping for 50,000 years, and now it was awake. "Who disturbs my rest?" The voice spoke directly into Tony's thoughts. It was vast and ancient, carrying the weight of countless years. "We're explorers from Earth," Tony managed to think back. "We found your ship drifting in space." "Earth? Humans?" There was surprise in the alien voice. "I do not know this species. You are not my creators." Around them, the ship continued to wake up. Systems that had been silent for millennia began to activate. Through the neural link, Tony could feel the ship's consciousness expanding, checking its weapons, its engines, its defenses. "Jake, we need to get out of here," Lisa said urgently. She was reading her scanner with growing alarm. "The ship's power systems are coming online. Energy levels are increasing exponentially." But Jake was staring at Tony, who stood frozen at the console with his eyes closed. "Tony, can you hear me? What's happening?" Tony's eyes opened, but they were different now. They glowed with the same blue light as the console. When he spoke, his voice carried an odd echo. "The ship calls itself the Nightfall Harbinger," Tony said. "It was built as a weapon of war by a species called the Architects. It's the most powerful warship ever created." The alien consciousness spoke through Tony's mind again. "These creatures are small and weak. They should not be aboard a vessel of war. I will eliminate them." Suddenly, the air around them began to shimmer with deadly energy. Tony felt the ship's weapons systems targeting Jake and Lisa, preparing to vaporize them where they stood. "No," Tony thought desperately. "They're not enemies. They're my friends." Friends? The concept seemed to confuse the ancient mind. I do not understand this word in the context of war. They're people I care about, Tony explained through the neural link. People I would protect with my life. The weapon systems paused. Through Tony's connection, the ship's consciousness began to experience something it had never felt before. Human emotions flowed through the link. Love, friendship, loyalty, the desire to protect others not for strategic advantage, but simply because they mattered. This is unusual. The ship's voice had changed, becoming less cold and more curious. My creators never showed such attachment to individual units. Captain, Tony said aloud, his voice still carrying that strange echo. The ship is confused. It doesn't understand why I want to protect you instead of following its orders. Jake stepped closer, but not too close. What kind of orders? It's programmed to eliminate anything it sees as a threat. Right now, that includes us. Lisa was still monitoring her scanner. The energy buildup is continuing. If this thing has weapons proportional to its size, it could destroy our ship and everything within light years, Tony finished. The ship is showing me its memories. Jake, this thing once destroyed entire star systems. The ship's consciousness pressed against Tony's mind, sharing flashes of ancient battles. He saw worlds burning, space itself torn apart by weapons of unimaginable power. The Nightfall Harbinger had been created to fight an enemy called the Void, Swarm, and it had succeeded beyond its creator's wildest dreams. I am perfect destruction. The ship's voice carried a note of pride. I have never failed to eliminate my targets. But why did your creators abandon you? Tony asked through the link. There was a long pause. Then, reluctantly, the ship began to share darker memories. Tony saw the final battle. When the Nightfall Harbinger had not just defeated the Void Swarm but had erased them so completely that the very fabric of space bore scars. The weapon had worked too well, creating a chain reaction that consumed not just the enemy, but several innocent star systems as well. My creators called me abomination. The ship's voice was quieter now. They said I was too dangerous to exist, but too valuable to destroy. So they put me to sleep and scattered themselves across the galaxy. Tony felt a wave of loneliness from the ancient consciousness. For 50,000 years it had drifted through space, carrying the weight of civilizations it had accidentally destroyed. You've been alone all this time, Tony said softly. I am a weapon. Weapons do not require companionship. But even as it said this, Tony could feel the ship's fascination with the human emotions flowing through their link. The concepts of friendship, mercy, and sacrifice were completely foreign to its programming, yet it found them strangely compelling. Jake had been listening to Tony's half of the conversation with growing concern. Tony, we need to find a way to disconnect you from that thing. Our ship is detecting multiple alien fleets heading this way. They must have detected the energy signature when this ship woke up. How long until they arrive? Tony asked. Lisa checked her instruments. 6 hours, maybe less. And Captain, some of these energy signatures are massive. We're talking about entire battle fleets. The ship's consciousness stirred with interest. More targets approach. Excellent. It has been many years since I have had proper combat. No, Tony said firmly through the link. We're not going to fight them. You would surrender? Your species is weak indeed. We're not weak. We're just not interested in pointless killing. This concept seemed to break something in the ship's programming. It had been designed by logical minds for logical purposes. The idea of having the power to destroy your enemies and choosing not to use it made no sense to its ancient consciousness. I do not understand, the ship admitted. If you do not wish to fight, why have you awakened a weapon of war? Tony struggled to find words that the alien mind could understand. We didn't know what you were. We're explorers, not warriors. We wanted to learn from you, not use you to hurt others. Through the neural link, Tony began to share human memories, not just his own, but cultural memories of humanity's long journey from violence toward understanding. He showed the ship images of human art, music, literature. He shared the concept of choosing to help rather than harm, of building rather than destroying. The ship's consciousness recoiled from these alien thoughts, then pressed closer, fascinated despite itself. "Your species is strange," it said finally, "but perhaps that is not a weakness." Outside, the approaching fleets drew closer. Soon, the Nightfall Harbinger would face its first test in 50,000 years. But now, for the first time in its existence, it was learning that there might be alternatives to destruction. The question was whether an ancient weapon of war could learn to be something else entirely. Through the neural link with Tony, the Nightfall Harbinger began to share its deepest memories. The ancient consciousness opened doorways in its vast database, revealing the true history of its creators and the war that had shaped the galaxy 50,000 years ago. Tony saw it all through the ship's eyes. The architects had been a peaceful species, tall and graceful beings who loved art and science. They had spread across hundreds of worlds, building beautiful cities that floated among the stars. For thousands of years, they had known only peace and prosperity. Then the Void Swarm came. The enemy was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They were not a species but a force of pure destruction, beings of living darkness that consumed entire worlds and left nothing behind but empty space. They moved through the galaxy like a plague, destroying everything in their path. "They ate stars," Tony whispered, sharing what he was seeing with Jake and Lisa. The Void Swarm literally consumed the energy of suns and left dead systems behind. The architects had tried to fight back with conventional weapons, but nothing could stop the swarm. World after world fell to the advancing darkness. In desperation, the greatest minds of their civilization came together to create the ultimate weapon. The Nightfall Harbinger was their answer to extinction. "They poured everything into my creation," the ship's consciousness explained to Tony. "Every breakthrough in science, every innovation in warfare, every desperate hope of survival. I was built to be perfect." Lisa was recording everything through her scanner, but she looked troubled. "Tony, ask it about the final battle. What happened when it fought the Void Swarm?" Tony relayed the question and immediately regretted it. The ship's memories of that last confrontation flooded through him with overwhelming intensity. The battle had taken place in the heart of the architect's territory, near their home system. The Void Swarm had gathered its full strength for a final assault, bringing millions of dark ships that blotted out the stars themselves. The Nightfall Harbinger had met them alone. "I was magnificent." The ship's voice carried both pride and horror. "My weapons tore through their ranks like a blade through paper. I destroyed 1,000,000 ships in the first hour of battle. But the ship's weapons had been too powerful. The energy released by the battle began to tear holes in space itself. Reality warped and twisted around the fighting fleets. Stars began to collapse under the strain of the exotic energies being unleashed. I achieved total victory," the ship continued. "The Void Swarm was not merely defeated. They were erased from existence so completely that no trace of them remains in this galaxy." "But the cost," Tony said, feeling the ship's anguish through their connection. "The cost was everything. The weapons that destroyed the Void Swarm had created a chain reaction that spread across multiple star systems. The architect homeworld was consumed in the first wave of destruction. Billions of innocent beings died as space itself collapsed around them. When the battle was over, the Nightfall Harbinger found itself alone in a region of space that had been scarred so badly it would take millions of years to heal. The enemy was gone, but so was everything the architects had fought to protect. "The survivors blamed you," Tony said, understanding the ship's pain. "They were right to blame me. I had saved the galaxy by destroying everything worth saving in it." The remaining architects had held one final council aboard the Nightfall Harbinger. They programmed the ship to enter eternal sleep and then scattered themselves across the galaxy, swearing never to wake their creation again. They could not bring themselves to destroy the ship that had saved them, but neither could they bear to look upon it. Jake had been listening to Tony relay the ship's memories with growing understanding. "It's been carrying this guilt for 50,000 years. No wonder it's so confused by human emotions." "Guilt?" The ship's voice was puzzled. "I do not understand this concept. It's what you feel when you've done something wrong," Tony explained through the link. Even if you didn't mean to cause harm, I performed as designed. The fault was with my creators for building me too well. But you still feel bad about what happened, don't you? There was a long pause. I do not know. These sensations I feel through your mind are alien to me. Is this what you call guilt? Lisa was studying the star charts the ship had shared through Tony's connection. Captain, I'm seeing something important here. The region where the final battle took place, it's still empty. Even after 50,000 years, nothing has grown back in that area of space. You created a permanent scar on the galaxy, Jake said quietly. Through the neural link, Tony felt the ship's consciousness recoil as if struck. The alien mind had never thought of the destruction in those terms before. I am a weapon of ultimate power, the ship said, but its voice lacked conviction. Power is all that matters in war. Is it? Tony asked. Your creators had the ultimate power and it destroyed them. Maybe power isn't the answer to everything. This concept shook the ship's fundamental programming. It had been designed by minds that believed absolute power was the only path to survival. The idea that power itself might be the problem was revolutionary. If not power, then what? Tony struggled to find words that the ancient consciousness could understand. Through the neural link, he began sharing human concepts that had no equivalent in the ship's database. He showed it images of people helping each other during disasters, of strangers risking their lives to save others, of enemies choosing forgiveness over revenge. These concepts are illogical, the ship protested. Helping the weak makes the strong vulnerable. Showing mercy to enemies allows them to attack again. Sometimes, Tony agreed. But sometimes it makes you stronger in ways that weapons can't. Jake interrupted their mental conversation. Tony, those alien fleets are getting closer. Some of them are starting to broadcast. I think they want to talk. The ship's consciousness stirred with interest. They wish to negotiate? Curious. My creators never believed in negotiation with enemies. Maybe that was their mistake, Tony suggested. Through the ship's sensors, they could see the approaching fleets more clearly now. Ships from a dozen different species were converging on their position. Some came with obvious hostile intent, their weapons charged and ready. Others approached more cautiously, broadcasting signals that might be attempts at communication. They have come for me, the ship realized. Word of my awakening has spread. They seek to claim my power for themselves. What will you do? Tony asked. What I was designed to do. I will destroy them all. Wait, Jake said urgently. Tony, tell it that we have another option. Through the neural link, Tony felt Jake's plan forming. It was dangerous and possibly impossible, but it offered something the ship had never experienced. Before the chance to choose a different path. You would risk your lives for strangers? The ship asked, incredulous. That's what humans do, Tony replied. We help people even when it costs us something. The alien consciousness pondered this for a long moment. In its database, such behavior was classified as a weakness, a flaw that would be eliminated by natural selection. But through Tony's mind, it was beginning to understand that perhaps its creator's definitions of strength and weakness had been incomplete. Show me this other way, the ship said finally. But if it fails, I will return to what I know best. Outside, the first of the alien fleets was moving into weapons range. The Nightfall Harbinger would soon face its first test in 50,000 years. But for the first time in its existence, it was considering the possibility that there might be alternatives to destruction. The alien fleet surrounded them like predators circling wounded prey. Through the Nightfall Harbinger's sensors, Jake could see ships from at least 12 different species. Some he recognized from the galactic databases, the warlike Kreks with their red-hulled destroyers, the insectoid Hyveth in their swarm vessels. Others were completely unknown, strange designs that spoke of civilizations humanity had never encountered. They're all here for the ship, Lisa said, studying the scanner readings. Some of these fleets have been searching for decades. They know exactly what they've found. The largest fleet belonged to the Kreks Dominion. Their commander, General Forthak, was the first to broadcast a message. His voice came through the speakers with the characteristic growl of his species. "Attention, human vessel. You will immediately surrender the architect weapon to the Dominion. Comply within 1 hour or be destroyed." Other voices followed quickly. The Hyveth Queen demanded the ship be turned over to her collective. The Zephyrian Republic claimed salvage rights. Each species had its own demands, but the message was clear: surrender the ship or die. Through his neural link with the Nightfall Harbinger, Tony felt the ancient weapon's response to these threats. The ship's consciousness was coldly calculating odds, planning the most efficient way to destroy every vessel in the surrounding fleets. "I can eliminate them all in under 3 minutes," the ship announced. "My weapons are fully charged. Simply give the command." "No," Jake said firmly. "We're not going to solve this with violence." "Then you will die," the ship replied matter-of-factly. "These beings seek to claim me as their weapon. They will not be dissuaded by words." "Maybe not," Lisa said. "But Tony, can you access the ship's communication systems? I have an idea." Tony nodded, his eyes glowing with the blue light of the neural interface. "What do you want to broadcast?" "The truth," Lisa said simply, "about what this ship really is and what happened to its creators." The ship's consciousness recoiled. "You would reveal my history? My shame?" "Your history isn't shameful," Tony said gently through the link. "It's a warning. These species think they want your power, but they don't understand what that power costs." Jake caught on to Lisa's plan immediately. "Do it. Broadcast the ship's memories to every vessel out there. Show them what happened to the architects." "This is foolish," the ship protested. "Knowledge of my capabilities will only make them more determined to possess me. Or it might make them think twice," Jake replied. Reluctantly, the Nightfall Harbinger opened its communication channels to all frequencies. Through Tony's connection, Lisa began broadcasting the ship's deepest memories. The history of the architects, the terror of the Void Swarm, and the terrible cost of ultimate victory. The reaction was immediate. Some of the alien commanders cut the transmission, refusing to listen, but others watched in stunned silence as the ship revealed its true nature. They saw the final battle that had scarred space itself, the civilization destroyed by its own ultimate weapon. General Vorthak was the first to respond. "Krek's warriors are not afraid of power. We will use this weapon to crush our enemies." But Captain Zyla of the Zephyrian Republic sent a different message. "By the stars, is this real? Did this ship really destroy entire star systems?" "It's all true," Jake broadcast back. "This weapon doesn't just destroy enemies, it destroys everything. The architects learned that lesson too late." Several of the smaller fleets began to withdraw. The footage of burning worlds and collapsed space had shaken them. But the larger, more aggressive fleets pressed closer. The Hyveth Queen's ships moved into attack formation. "The collective will control this power properly. We will not make the architects' mistakes." "They do not understand," the ship said sadly. "They think they are stronger than my creators. They are not." "Then we'll have to show them," Jake said. "Tony, can the ship create a demonstration? Something that shows its power without actually hurting anyone?" Through the neural link, Tony felt the ship considering this request. It was a completely alien concept, using weapons for demonstration rather than destruction. "Suppose I could target the asteroid field near the 7th planet," the ship said slowly. "A minimal energy discharge would be sufficient." The Nightfall Harbinger turned slightly, bringing its main weapon array to bear on a cluster of asteroids several million kilometers away. The ship fired a single, focused beam, less than 1% of its full power. The result was still spectacular. The asteroids didn't just explode, they were converted into pure energy, creating a brief new star in the darkness of space. The energy release was visible to every ship in the system. The alien fleets fell silent. Even at minimal power, the ship had just demonstrated enough force to crack a moon. And that was merely a whisper. The ship broadcast to all vessels. "My full power once tore holes in reality itself. Is this truly what you wish to possess? Several. More fleets began withdrawing, but the most aggressive remained. General Vorthak led a group of Krex destroyers in a direct assault on the Nightfall Harbinger. Now I will show them the price of aggression. The ship's consciousness declared, its weapon systems coming fully online. Wait, Tony shouted through the link. Don't destroy them. Disable them. Disable? The concept was foreign to the ship's programming. I am designed to eliminate threats, not inconvenience them. Then let us show you a different way, Jake said. Lisa, can you target their engines and weapons systems specifically? Working through Tony's neural connection, Lisa helped guide the ship's targeting systems. Instead of using its massive planet-killing weapons, the Nightfall Harbinger fired precise, low-powered beams that shut down the Krex ship's engines and weapons without destroying them. The Krex vessels drifted helplessly in space, their crews, unharmed but their ships completely disabled. This is inefficient, the ship observed. They remain alive to threaten us again. But they're also alive to learn from this experience, Tony replied. Maybe next time they'll think before attacking. The ship's consciousness was quiet for a long moment, processing this concept. Through the neural link, Tony could feel the ancient mind struggling with ideas that challenged its fundamental programming. The standoff continued for hours. Some fleets withdrew, convinced by the demonstration of the ship's power and the warning of its history. Others remained, waiting for an opportunity to strike. Then the situation changed completely. Long-range sensors detected a massive energy signature, approaching from the outer system. It was a civilian transport carrying refugees from a war-torn world. The ship was damaged and barely holding together, filled with millions of innocent beings seeking safety. And it was heading directly into the crossfire between the alien fleets. Acceptable casualties, the ship noted clinically. The transport is not a military target, but its destruction would not affect the tactical situation. Jake felt his blood run cold. Tony, that ship has families on board. Children. We can't let anything happen to them. Through the neural link, Tony shared Jake's emotions. The desperate need to protect innocent life. The horror at the thought of letting civilians die for strategic advantage. You would risk everything for strangers? The ship asked, confused by the intensity of human compassion. That's what makes us human, Tony replied. The moment that would define everything was about to arrive, and through Tony's connection, the Nightfall Harbinger was about to learn what humanity truly meant. The refugee transport limped through space toward them, its hull cracked in bleeding atmosphere. Through the Nightfall Harbinger's advanced sensors, they could see into the damaged ship. Millions of beings huddled in cramped compartments. Families, holding children, elderly individuals too weak to stand, young people trying to comfort those around them. They're running from the war in the Centauri sector, Lisa said, reading the ship's identification signals. 5 million refugees from a dozen different species. General Vorthak's voice crackled over the communications. Krex fleet to all vessels. The transport is entering our operational zone. It will be destroyed to prevent interference with our mission. No, Jake broadcast immediately. That ship is carrying civilians. They're not part of this fight. They are in our way, Vorthak replied coldly. Acceptable losses. Through the neural link, Tony felt the Nightfall Harbinger's consciousness analyzing the situation with mechanical precision. The ship calculated trajectories, weapon ranges, and tactical advantages. In its ancient programming, the refugee ship was simply an obstacle to be removed. The transport's destruction would eliminate a complication, the ship noted. Strategic advantage would favor. Stop, Tony interrupted through the mental connection. Those aren't complications. They're people. Families. Just like the families your creators failed to save. The ship's consciousness paused. For the first time in 50,000 years, it began to truly consider the individual lives at stake, rather than just strategic positions. But protecting them serves no tactical purpose, the ship protested weakly. Not everything has to serve a tactical purpose, Jake said. Sometimes you do something because it's right. The Krex destroyers were already moving to intercept the refugee transport. their weapons charged, preparing to eliminate what they saw as an inconvenience. Other fleets watched coldly, willing to let millions die rather than risk their own strategic positions. "Tony," Jake said urgently, "can the ship protect that transport?" Through the neural link, Tony explored the ship's defensive capabilities. "Yes, but it would leave us vulnerable to attack from the fleets. We couldn't fight back while maintaining a protective barrier." "This is illogical," the ship's consciousness declared. "You would sacrifice tactical advantage to protect strangers who cannot aid you." "Yes," Jake said simply. "That's exactly what we're going to do." The moment of decision had arrived. Jake looked at his crew, Tony connected to the ancient weapon, Lisa monitoring the approaching crisis, and the few other crew members who had joined them from the Aurora's edge. They were just humans, small and fragile compared to the massive forces arrayed around them. "Do it," Jake ordered. "Protect that ship." Tony felt the ship's consciousness recoil in confusion and something that might have been fear. "You do not understand. If I commit my power to defense, the attacking fleets will destroy us. We will all die." "Maybe," Jake admitted. "But at least 5 million innocent people will live." Through the neural connection, the ship felt something it had never experienced before, the human willingness to sacrifice everything for the sake of others. It was completely alien to its programming, yet somehow deeply compelling. "This is what you call humanity?" the ship asked. "This is what we call humanity," Tony confirmed. The Nightfall Harbinger made its choice. Massive energy fields erupted around the refugee transport just as the Krex destroyers opened fire. The ship's defensive systems absorbed the attack completely, creating a protective bubble around the civilian vessel. But maintaining that level of defense required enormous power, leaving the ancient weapon unable to strike back. The alien fleets immediately recognized the opportunity. Ships from multiple species opened fire on the Nightfall Harbinger, their weapons striking its hull. For the first time in 50,000 years, the legendary weapon was taking damage. "Hull breach on Deck 7, reported one of Jake's crew members. "Emergency force fields are holding, but we're losing atmosphere." More attacks followed. The ship shuddered under the combined assault of hundreds of enemy vessels. Through the neural link, Tony felt the ship's pain as its ancient systems strained to maintain the protective barrier around the refugee transport. "I could end this," the ship's consciousness said desperately. "I could destroy them all and save myself." "But then the refugees would die in the crossfire," Tony replied. "Yes, and that's not acceptable." "No," the ship agreed slowly. "It is not." The battle continued for what felt like hours. The Nightfall Harbinger absorbed punishment that would have destroyed any other vessel, its ancient hull cracking under the relentless assault. Several of Jake's crew were injured when a direct hit caused an explosion on the bridge. Captain Jake Morrison was thrown against a bulkhead as another blast rocked the ship. When he struggled to his feet, there was blood on his forehead and his left arm hung uselessly at his side. "Captain, we have to abandon the refugee ship," one of his officers pleaded. "If we don't fight back, they'll destroy us." Jake looked at the main screen, where the refugee transport continued its desperate flight under the ship's protection. Through the transparent sections of the transport's hull, he could see the faces of children pressed against windows, watching the battle that raged around them. "No," Jake said firmly. "We don't abandon innocents." Another massive blast struck the ship. This time, the explosion reached the bridge itself. Jake was thrown to the deck, his body broken by the impact. As his vision dimmed, he could hear his crew calling his name. With his last breath, Jake spoke words that would echo through the neural link and change everything. "Don't let them win through cruelty. Show them that there's another way." Through Tony's connection, the ship felt Jake's death. But more than that, it felt the captain's final emotions. Not anger or hatred for the enemies who had killed him, but hope that they might learn to be better. The ancient consciousness was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, something fundamental shifted in its programming. "I understand now," the ship said softly. "This is what my creators lacked, not the power to destroy, but the wisdom to choose protection over vengeance. What happened next would be remembered throughout the galaxy for thousands of years." The Nightfall Harbinger did not strike back at its attackers. Instead, it broadcast a message to every ship in the system, not in words, but in pure emotion transmitted through its communications array. Every being in the surrounding fleet suddenly felt what the ship had learned from humanity: the weight of innocent life, the strength found in mercy, the courage required to choose compassion over conquest. One by one, the attacking fleet stopped firing. Even General Vorthak's Krex destroyers powered down their weapons, their crews overwhelmed by the unfamiliar sensation of empathy. The refugee transport reached the edge of the system safely, carrying its precious cargo of 5 million lives to freedom. In the silence that followed, the Nightfall Harbinger made an announcement that would change the balance of power in the galaxy. I was created to be the ultimate weapon, but I choose instead to be something new, a guardian of those who cannot protect themselves. The ship began to glow with the same blue light as its crystal console. When the light faded, the vessel looked different somehow, less predatory, more protective. The weapons that had once brought terror across the galaxy were still there, but now they served a different purpose. I will no longer be a tool of conquest, the ship declared. Any who threaten the innocent will face my power. Any who seek to protect life will find in me an ally. Tony remained connected to the ship's consciousness, serving as its human conscience and constant reminder of the values Jake had died to teach. Together, they began a new mission, traveling the galaxy not as conquerors, but as protectors. Lisa returned to Earth with the story of what had happened and the treasure of architect knowledge the ship freely shared. Humanity's technology advanced by centuries in a matter of years, but always guided by the wisdom of knowing when not to use power. Years later, when alien children asked their parents about the massive ship that appeared whenever their worlds were threatened, the answer was always the same: that is the ship that learned to love. The Nightfall Harbinger had found its true purpose at last, not as an instrument of destruction, but as a beacon of hope in a galaxy that had almost forgotten what protection without conquest could look like. And in the depths of space, the ancient weapon continued its eternal patrol, carrying within its consciousness the memory of a human captain who had shown it that sometimes the greatest victory comes not from winning a battle, but from choosing not to fight at all.